Under the blood-red moon, the unorthodox faction's foremost master and lord of Jukwagung Palace. The notorious leader of the Thousand Evils Alliance, famed for his innate cruelty and ruthlessness. Banya. In the span of half a night, this was the name chosen by the man who decorated the unorthodox faction's largest school. He then decided to bring the other unorthodox factions groups who had once wronged him to their knees one by one. At the mere age of 24, he became the leader of the Thousand Evils Alliance. The countless unorthodox faction groups, once driven solely by their own interests, began to rally under him, steadily growing in power. As anxiety and dread that the orthodox faction might soon be overwhelmed cast a dark shadow over the Murim, the man made a public declaration. If I marry Bakery Youngs, I shall ensure the unorthodox faction initiates no provocations for the next 10 years. Bakery Youngso, the beloved youngest daughter of a prestigious orthodox faction clan. The marriage between Banya, the unorthodox faction's foremost master and a villain of the Murim, was the very symbol of a grand reconciliation between the orthodox and unorthodox factions. But who could have ever guessed that Banya of all people would meet his end at the hands of his own wife? The manhwa begins, his picture sits carefully with burning incense. With his wife in mourning, who realizes the 3-year mourning period ends that day. She wonders what she's supposed to do now, or if what she did was the right thing to do, killing her husband. But then again it occurs to her that she had no choice. She presses her eyes shut in agony as she recalls the incident that prompted her to take that action against him. He ordered for all the disciples under the age of 8 to be gathered, claiming sacrifices are always necessary for a greater cause, so they should feel honored that their worthless lives can serve a purpose. The man listening had asked if he intended to kill them, but he just responded with a question: what's the drama in a simple death? He disclosed his plan to slaughter them alive, explaining that it needed to be so gruesome that it'll look like the orthodox faction retaliating against them. Then he declared, "The Murim will be mine for the taking soon enough." In the present day she lights an incense while she offers an apology. "I'm sorry, I'm returning to my clan now. I hope, in your next life, you're reborn as a good person, and find the peaceful life you never had. I truly pray for it." But nothing could have prepared her for the next minute. The door was suddenly pulled open and in front stood the man she'd spent 3 years mourning with a remark: "Those plain clothes suit you remarkably well, wife." She stands frozen, unable to comprehend what's happening. All she can manage to say is one word: "How?" But he continues. This time he casually asks, "Tell me, wife, for whom exactly have you been in mourning?" Her jaw drops, her hand trying to cover her mouth as she attempts to piece everything together. How? She watched them prepare his body with her own eyes. He leans in closer, calling her wife, and even with her hand almost covering her nose she's able to smell it, incense, wood, and the smell of earth. "Don't tell me he crawled out of his grave?" He repeats the question again, asking, who died for her to be wearing those mourning clothes? But the same goes for her, she still remains shocked, only this time, she wonders what to say. She attempts to get away from him, but her legs give out and she collapses into his arms, unconscious. Later around evening, he asks if she's feeling steady now. She tries to fake unconsciousness, but he sees through it and simply tells her to stop pretending. He knows she's awake. He helps her up and hands her a cup of something steaming. As she blows on the hot drink, she can't help but notice how different he is. He was never that considerate. Then she asks him what happened. He casually mentions that she collapsed while they were talking, but she quickly clarifies she meant the part where he passed, only for him to chuckle and say, "Passed away? Goodness, you make me sound ancient." Then he admits indeed everyone seems to think he died 3 whole years ago, no less, and that today marks the end of the mourning. Funny thing is, I don't recall dying at all. She felt a jolt of dread, but then she asks, "Then your last memory, what is it?" He stares at her in silence before he speaks. A face twisted in agony, she grows anxious, only questioning if he remembers how she killed him, but he continues, "Me lying there, looking down, wife. She looks down, fear flashing across her face as she realizes he does remember, but he continues. And then, the way you trembled all over. She looks up confused. Then he says, bathed in morning sunlight she looked even more beautiful than ever, the way your body moved helplessly with every motion of mine, it was mesmerizing. She shrugs as she thinks, she knows when it was the morning before she killed him. If that's his last memory, then it means he doesn't remember how he died. Her mood changes as she furrows her eyebrows, wondering why she feels she shouldn't trust a word he says, and then suddenly, he lunges at her. She dodged just in time, and with his hand kept hanging in the air he asks in a calm voice, "Didn't you miss me?" He then takes her hand and places it firmly on his chest as he continues, "It hurts, feeling like you're pushing me away." Feeling his steady heartbeat, she smiles to herself as she realizes he must be telling the truth. But then, he asks her if she knows what's strange. He tells her he doesn't remember a thing and adds that even the bastards at Chunsrian don't know how he died either. It wasn't poison, no scars left on the body, so they say it must have been chi reversal or whatever. If this were 3 years ago, no one would have dared to say that in front of me. And apparently Jukwagong is now in the hands of my bastard half-brother? Yeah, that's the worst, so that trash is my successor? He tells her that's where he's at right now, mentioning how he'd lost all his memory after the sweet time they had together. Then he adds that he'd woken up in the dark, clawed his way out, and it turned out to be his grave. He walked to Chunsrian straight and they tell him he's been dead for 3 years. They didn't even bother to investigate my cause of death before dumping me in the ground, can you believe that? So here's the thing. I need your help. On the day I was murdered. He shares his intention to dig into everything that happened at Chunsrian that day, beat them down one by one. After all, someone's bound to spill. She asks if he plans to torture confessions out of them. With a smile he asks if that bothers her, stating, "That just so happens to be what he does best." In a new scene, he sits comfortably, almost like a maniac on the throne. The elders present look terrified, but he just invites them in, saying there's no need to stand on ceremony now, is there? A man takes the initiative to speak. He points out the obvious, the body on the floor, and at the same time wondering if he'd fully recovered his energy so quickly. Banya explains, then shares that he really never got along with the previous lord. He kept rambling on about reverse flow techniques and sealing masks, always doubting him, demanding he explain how he came back over and over again. With a smirk he retorts that it got annoying. He glances at their boots and gives a remarks, "Looks like everyone swung by my grave before coming here. Too bad you didn't inspect it that passionately 3 years ago." Their lives flash before their eyes. After all, the Lord was a scapegoat. They congratulate him on his resurrection, however he responds with a sneer, stating anyone who overheard them might think the demon lord himself descended. He asks them to take their seats, already pointing out how he's already offered twice now. He warns them not to make him repeat himself, adding, "It's been 3 years already. I guess you all must have forgotten what kind of man I am." Supporting his head with hand he retorts that it seems like a lot has changed since he left, even bringing up the new faces present. He asks about Chunsel Siang, and the man reports that he's currently imprisoned in the underground dungeon. He bursts into laughter immediately as he asks if the minute he died they throw his direct subordinate into a cell. However, the man explains that they'd never dared to do so. Instead he mentions it was the doing of someone already dead and gone, looking at the body on the floor. Then he orders that his subordinate is to be reinstated immediately and the women stashed in his quarters are to be sent out before he deals with that himself. Silence again fills the room and he ponders silently on the empty seat he noticed earlier. Then he switched to sharing his thoughts out loud. "No one showed from Jukwagong, either they never planned to or they heard I was back in Tucked Tail. I thought we did a major purge and out of all of the scum they go and choose Hamuji as their new lord." His gaze hardens as he thinks, this time he'll cut out the rot for good, but before that, there's one thing that needs handling. "Bakery Youngso, this should have been your cute little head and holding right now," he declares. On the other hand, Youngso writes a letter to her mother. "Mother, have you been well? This is your youngest Youngso, you won't believe it, but on the day I ended my mourning, my husband returned alive, can you believe that? I'm doomed now. She slumps downward thinking that won't do, the letter lacks both propriety and dignity. She accepts that she wouldn't be able to write a proper letter to her mother that day and drops the brush, but she hears someone call her suddenly. She glances towards the entrance and recognizes the person standing to be Cho-Cho, who pleads that she must relocate at once. Her eyes glistens, as she realizes the madam still remembers her, but then she gets to business. She asks her if there's anything she needs to take with her, but she just tells her as she can see there's not much worth taking. Cho-Cho snaps, she mentions to lock someone so noble up in a freezing room like that and to send away her loyal servant, but she assures her not to worry, reporting she's reported everything to Rienju. She declares with joy that she'll get everything that has been taken from her, noting her days of suffering are now over. But she doesn't look too relieved, instead she considers, happiness, will it really be? She ponders on how things will go once the truth eventually comes to light. Banya will try to kill her, and if she dies her family won't sit silently. They'll surely come after him to avenge her, and if that happens, all that's left will be war. Cho-Cho parks up her items quickly, and once she's done notes that they must go now, revealing Rienju himself has ordered that she be moved to the finest quarter. Later, as Banya strolls, he stops at the sound of a pipa playing. As he watches her play, he comments, "Come to think of it, it's been almost 3.5 years." The memory from before, he asked what was happening, and the old lady responded, explaining that the Beckley household provides meals to the poor. And the one playing the pipa right now is none other than the lost beautiful woman in hiding, Lady Bakley Youngso of the Bakley family. Staring at her now, he can't help but notice how she truly looks like a celestial maiden. He suddenly bursts into her quarter, and as she faces him she asks if he's arrived, gently tucking her hair behind her ears. She greets him with a bow, however he takes her arm and asks her not to push it. "What if you collapse again?" She offers to at least serve him some tea, but he refuses and asks instead, "Rather than that, do you happen to know someone named Seo Jang Jiang?" Lifting her chin, he continues, stating he was her original fiancé. He shares that someone at the main hall mentioned earlier that he still remains unmarried. They say he turned down every marriage proposal that came his way, not even taking in a single concubine, living like a widower in mourning. She shifts her gaze as she asks if he isn't 25 that year, but Banya responds stating he isn't quite sure, but Seo Jang Jiang might be quite disappointed to hear that. He asks if she really doesn't remember, and she responds stating it's all in the past, noting it's been over 3 years since the engagement was broken. She discloses the only time they ever met was when their parents spoke briefly, but then he asks, "So your families knew each other?" With a smile he shares his observation, that there's so much he doesn't know about her. That's right, so very little. Someone who seemed like they couldn't even hurt a fly. I never imagined that single embroidery needle could nearly almost take my life. The pain is still vividly etched in my body. Gazing down at her he ponders, perhaps, the title of greatest in the demonic sect truly belongs to you. "Madam," he calls, and then demands she tell him what it is that she loves. She questions the suddenness, looking in confusion, but he just tells her he already mentioned there's so much he doesn't know about her, so now he intends to learn. He asks if that's too broad, and then mentions he'll start with what he's curious about, asking if she'll give him an answer, and she says yes. "Do you want me to die again?" Her voice shakes at the thought of her being caught already, but she asks why he would ask her such. She tells him she doesn't understand why he's saying that, but as he observes her trembling body he thinks, as expected, she avoids the question. With his arms folded he thinks he doesn't know what kind of black magic she used until now, but this time without fail, I'll make sure to break this curse, he declares. Now she knows without doubt that he knows the truth. She clenches her shaking hand as she thinks he remembered that she killed him. She reflects, okay, the only reason that made it possible for her to kill him 3 years ago, it was because he'd let down his guard thinking she couldn't fight. Although if it comes down to a 1v1 her chances are pretty slim, so, she thinks she'll have no other choice than to just trick him. Her eyes go watery in an instant as she asks why he would ask her something like that. Gazing down at her with coldness, he tells her he was just curious about how much she hates him. Then she admits, "You may be scary, but I've never hated you." But he doesn't buy her acting. Instead, he asks if noble houses also offer acting classes before he admits. Honestly, he can't tell where the truth ends and where the lies begin. "How can you not hate me?" She asks again why she would, and he reminds her how the moment he proposed a marriage alliance, the mistress of the Bakeries family ran at him wild with a spear. "The whole house loathes me, yet why don't you?" He lets out a frustrated sigh as he circles around her trying to figure it out himself, but his actions only grow her suspicions further. He's acting even weirder than usual today. Then finally he stops and he points out that she knows he's not the kind to play mind games. His frustration grows as he mentions even corpses spill secrets once their skin is peeled off layer by layer. However, he sighs again, questioning how long until midnight, while Youngso, thinking to prepare herself for whatever trick he could have up his sleeves, reaches behind. He notices and asks what is in her hand, and she explains that her hands just felt idle. She shares that she'd done embroidery even during his mourning, so it's probably just become a habit. However, he sternly points out the embroidery frame, it wasn't originally there. She insists it was there. However, he's not backing down either. He points out that the embroidery frame was originally in the basket on the top of the cabinet, but she's not about to back down either. She smiles as she tells him it has been by her side all along, suggesting he must have seen wrong. But a realization hits him and he ponders on it silently. "So she managed to get something that far away without me noticing?" He asks her to tell him if she's in need of anything since it's almost midnight. However, she appears confused. He urges her, noting it's almost midnight, and finally once it's midnight, nothing happens. It's too good to be true, so he suggests they count to 100 just to be safe, while she just stares at him, confusion evident as she questions why he's so obsessed with midnight. What's he planning after counting to 100? 96, 97, 98, 99, and finally, 100. He sighs and then bursts out laughing like a maniac, forcing the atmosphere to be so tense. Then he tells her he knew it. He spreads his arm out in victory, yelling for her to confirm it. It's midnight and he's still there. He didn't go back. Then his voice rings. "It's because I didn't upset you this time, and you're still saying this isn't your curse?" She asks him what he's talking about, and with his face buried in his palm, he reveals it happened 19 times. He kept coming back to life, only to die again. Every time it felt like needles were ripping his insides apart. No matter why he tried, he'd always return to the moment when her needles killed him. But this time it was different. He didn't return to his death, he skipped 3 years ahead, to after he already died. Because on his 19th return, he gave her a towel, and this time, he spent all day playing nice with her. Do you know what happened? Midnight came, and the damn curse didn't trigger. It was you all along. However, she just stares at her hand in doubt, thinking it can't be true after all. She only killed him once, but he says he's been through it 19 times. He asks her not to bother pretending she doesn't know and to just lift the spell or curse or whatever it is. This time she speaks. She tells him he keeps saying she cursed him, but she knows nothing about that kind of thing. She admits to killing him. However, he cuts her off, pointing out she was the only one who succeeded in killing him, and asks if she's saying someone else fast the curse. She tells him unless it wasn't a person. Then he asks if she's suggesting it's maybe divine punishment, but she says that's not what she meant. However, he tells her no matter how he looks at it, it has to be her, suggesting maybe she cursed him even without realizing it, and again she denies it. This time, he grabs her jaw, urging her to not just deny it, but to dig into her memory right that moment. She tells him even if he presses her, it's 3 years ago. "I don't." He asks her if something casually came to her mind, and she says yes, there's exactly one thing, and then asks, "Would you come with me to the shrine?" In a new scene, they climb up a mountain hill. She turns to Banya and comments that she found it regardless. He asks if she's saying the Queen Mother statue he prayed to for a curse is there, but she chuckles and responds saying it wasn't even a curse, it was just a simple prayer. As she recalls her past conversations with people regarding the statue, she smiles to herself in relief. She thought she wouldn't find it, but she did. Finally, they go in. Faced with it, Banya ponders silently, so this monstrous thing is what I offered my prayers to, huh? As she lights the candle she suggests with a smile, even though it's like this now, if I build a small shrine near the Angels' Convent and enshrine it, but Banya cuts in, he asks why, so she can go curse him all day and night, and again she reminds him she mentioned previously it wasn't a curse. But he continues, he disclosed from his perspective that it's no different from a curse, urging her to take responsibility for whatever she said and take it back. He asks her to pray under the same condition as 3 years ago, and asks that the previous curse she put on him should be lifted. She intertwines her hand together, praying silently while glancing at the statue, but Banya isn't satisfied. Suspicious, he demands she prays out loud so he can hear, since he doesn't know she prayed for with all her heart, and she agrees. Bakery Youngso humbly prays to the Queen Mother, 3 years ago I offered this prayer, please give my husband, Angel Rienju Wabanya, a chance to live a good life. Many are responsible for the child growing up wickedly, so please consider this. She reveals she's grateful she gave her husband a chance, but she didn't mean to keep killing him until he performs good deeds. She bows her head and informs Banya once she's up it's over, but he just asks why on earth she would offer such a prayer. My dear wife, I am an evil man, so why would you pray for my good fortune at the Queen Mother's shrine that symbolizes death and punishment? She tries to explain, but he cuts her off, saying no buts. Again he asks why she would pray for his fortune when no one else prays for him. He bites his lips angrily and then asks bitterly, who are you to pray for my fortune? Later Banya reflects on how he'd mentioned they had to stay awake last midnight, however, that person is just sitting there sleeping. Honestly, her face is perfectly my type, and her body too. Endlessly desiring a body I never tire of holding every day. If we were to have a child, that would be good in its own way. I never thought about having children, but if the mother of my child were Bakery Youngso, it might just be okay. It takes one blink for his scenery to change. He stands in front of a beach blossom tree. He glances around wondering if perhaps he's dreaming, but then he spots Youngso down the hill. He tries to go to her, but he's immediately sent flying by a hand. Then as he tries to pick himself up, he suddenly hears this voice ask, who dares to stand so unfazed in front of me? This place is your dream, yet it is also mine, the Queen Mother of the West's realm. She furrows her eyebrows as she tells him that is a place his power can't reach, ordering him to remain on his knees like that. He tries to speak, but he realizes he can't. Wabanya, you have committed 10,000 great sins. You were supposed to be nailed to a rock and struck by lightning for 10,000 years. However, Bakery Youngso begged, even offering her chance to become an immortal, asking to reduce her husband's punishment. When I didn't grant it, she even made a wager. With a smile she turns to Bakery and asks her to recite what she said to her earlier, and she complies. How about having my husband stoned for his 10,000 great sins, with 10,000 good deeds? If he fails, I, Bakery Youngso, will never step foot in the immortal realm. She turns back to Banya asking if he heard his wife. She mentions there are more humans praying to her than grains of sand, but humans who dare to bet with her are rare, so she decided to take on the wager. Then she declares, Wabanya, if you do 10,000 good deeds from now you will be able to be reborn as an ordinary person, but the moment you commit one evil act, you will return to the moment of your death, through your wife's hands. She turns to Youngso and with a smirk mentions her proposal was arrogant, but she found that part of her appealing. Let's see who will win this bet. In a new scene, Banya opens his eyes. Youngso also opens her eyes as she rests her head on his chest. Once the realization hits her, she immediately gets up. Trying to cover up, she asks if he really assaulted someone while she's asleep, but he denies it, stating it wasn't his doing. He recalls the Queen Mother's words. In reality, they were both in a hazy state, indulging in each other, so she warned that he shouldn't be too shocked when he comes to his senses. Looking at her, he wonders if she hadn't heard what the Queen Mother said, why she continues with her scolding, asking if he's really trying to deny it when they're the only ones in the room. So he plays along, raising an eyebrow. He mentions their husband and wife, asking if it's really wrong for him to crave his wife's body. But she explains. Trying to do that when I don't want it, that is wrong. if you keep doing that you'll be sent back in time again. He agrees, but he sighs, besides doing good deeds all of a sudden. He turns to her, pointing out with all seriousness that this Wabanya grew up not even knowing what kindness is. With a soft voice she assures him, "If you're willing to try, maybe, we should start doing good deeds together one at a time." In a new scene, she stands outside fully dressed, recalling how she almost ran late because Cho-Cho made a fuss about dressing her up. Chun Sil-seong appears and greets her with a bow. She comments on his voice, it seems hoarse, and he explains it is because of the punishments he received in prison, but it'll gradually recover. More importantly, he thanks her for making sure he was fed well for the past 3 years, but she just waves it off. But a voice suddenly interrupts. "Lady, you personally made sure Chun Sil-seong ate? For 3 whole years?" Again she brushes it off, stating it was nothing, just plain porridge with a few side dishes. Glances at her, he asks if she made the porridge by her delicate hands, and she says yes, since there were no maids around. She explains that in prison one is only fed once every 2 days, which is just stale rice and salted soup, and besides he is direct subordinate, so she couldn't just ignore him. "Is it guilt?" Ryeonju asks, looking down at her, while Chun Sil-seong just repeats, "Guilt?" In confusion. Without hesitation he reveals she killed him 3 years ago. Young-so on the other hand tries to play it off, searching around as she teased him not to joke about that, pointing out how his own subordinate Chun Sil-seong seemed shaken. But Banya doesn't okay along, passing along a note. He clarified that it wasn't a joke and Chun Sil-seong doesn't look shaken at all. Chun Sil-seong takes the note and leaves. Once he leaves she pouts her lips, asking if he's really going to go about telling that to just anyone. As they walk she asks if he still has things he's curious about even after 19 regressions, but he just asks what she's talking about. "You said it yourself, 19 regressions, with your personality there's no way you would have left me alone all those time. I bet the moment you regressed the first thing you did was try to strangle me." She asks him to be honest with her, and afterwards asks how many times he tried to kill her. He admits he tried to kill her 17 times, but she finds something odd. On his 19th regression he showed her kindness, and he said that's how he was able to skip ahead to the current, 20th regression. "But there's one missing. Why didn't you kill me on your 18th regression?" she asks, and he replies calmly, saying, "That time I killed myself right after regressing." Then she asks if in the end he never got the answer he desired. "Are you still wondering why I killed you?" He asks if she's going to tell him that now, just like that, so easily, but she responds, sharing she doesn't plan to tell him. He tilts his head back as he mentions, "Of course not." He tells her she wouldn't imagine all what he did in his past regressions to make her talk, and if she was to spill it all now so pointlessly, then what will all his efforts amount to? "Just keep your mouth shut like you've always done, madam. I'll handle the investigations myself." He notices her fidgeting and asks why she's hesitating like that. She pulls herself together and asks him why he brought her to such a place. However, he just asks her to not be too scared, suggesting she take a look inside, up to the 2nd floor. It's just a regular restaurant. Her voice laced with a hint of curiosity, she asks why they're there, but he just takes her hand and asks if it isn't the usual reason why people come to a restaurant, to eat of course. He pulls her forward, and as he adjusts his seat, he asks her to stop looking around and have a seat, adding that he's already placed their order. She asks if he's a regular there, and he reveals that place is run by Jukwagong. Up to the 2nd floor it's just a regular dining house, the 3rd floor is for private rooms, and if one pays extra they could go to the 4th floor, which is all bedrooms. "You can probably guess what they're used for, right?" he asks, and she says yes. But then he discloses the real issue, it's the back. He mentions most of Chunyangri's income comes from the annex, disclosing how as soon as she became the mistress of Jukwagong she did 2 things. 1, she castrated her biological father, and 2, she banned all business operations in the annex, and because her late mother was from the annex of Chunyangri she knew exactly what went on there, and she was utterly sick of it. "But the moment I died, that bastard Wamuji restarted the business." She looks surprised, then she admits she had no idea there was such a story behind it, but he just tells her she's the previous youngest daughter of the bakery family, so filth like that wouldn't have reached her ears, and even besides that, after marrying him she barely went out. She ponders on the reason. It's because he'd get angry even if she just looked at another man. She asks him what exactly was happening in the annex, but just as he's about to reveal it to her, the waiter arrives with their order. She sets the food on the table and places Chunyangru's special glutinous rice sole served onto their female customers on front of Youngso. She doesn't actually drink, but the aroma smells so nice she decides to just take a little taste, and as expected, it's sweet. Banya, who'd been observing her, finally brings up her hesitation at the entrance earlier and asks, "You decided to come in because you saw the female guests, didn't you? Especially that family over there." Then he drops it like a bomb. Actually, the truth is, they're not actually a real family, they are people hired by Chunyangru or Jukwagong pretending to be customers. She asks if what he means is it's all for show, and he says exactly. The reason became clear by the very fact that she came in there, it was to put her mind at ease. She drops her cup suddenly, and gathering her resolve she asks, "We're not exactly here to eat, are we?" Then he goes straight to the point and admits actually they're there to do a good deed. They'll stage a scene big enough to draw everyone's attention and use it to trap Wamuji, who plans to visit the annex today, like a rat in the trap, and bring him down. He reveals Wamujin fulfills the filthy request of annex guests, using a colorless, odorless aphrodisiac of his own making, and mixes it into the glutinous rice sole before serving it. She goes stiff as she mentions he saw her drinking it, and yet but he cuts her off and mentions not every sole is laced with the drug. Then he asks her to listen. He mentions her someone who can just go around killing anymore, and in his opinion to stop Wamuji they'll need help from her eldest brother-in-law, asking if he isn't an official who investigates criminal cases in Gyeongseong. But as the leader of the underworld he can't approach him directly, so instead, they decided to spread a rumor that she was drugged at Chunyangru. Sitting across him, her breath hot, she asks if he hadn't mentioned there was nothing wrong with the soul, and he says that wasn't a lie. It's just that the server he hired added the drug right before serving it. Looking sluggish, she thinks she must detoxify it, however, as if he can read her thoughts, he asks her not to detoxify it. He mentions this as their only chance to save those young women trapped in Chunyangru, mentioning they can save those who could only leave the annex in death. But she just asks if he's forgotten one thing. Her body doesn't just heat up from drugs like that. The next minute she gags up blood, and he jerks up, watching in horror, saving her head as she crashes down. In a new scene, the Lord of Jukwagong enters. Once he sets his eyes on Banya, he demands to know what all the commotion is for, but Banya immediately pulls him by his shirt. He mentions there's a limit to shamelessness, asking what he means by commotion after he tried to harm his wife. Waminju can only repeat in confusion, "Harm your wife, me?" The other man with them suggests they take their misunderstanding outside, however Banya declared boldly, the angel Rienju, won't take a step until this horny bastard is dragged away." Waminju's right-hand man tries to reason with him, sharing they are in the process of searching the kitchen, so he should just calm down. On the other hand, Bakery lays down covered with a blanket, thinking, "Enough, if you're not going to hold me, at least let me touch myself. I said everyone out. Please." Outside, a man informs them he's found something that may serve as evidence. He walks in and reports that they'd found a colorless, odorless aphrodisiac in one corner of the kitchen. He also mentions the bottle was even labeled so the staff wouldn't make a mistake, and they confirmed it with the physician who examined the Lady of Union. He also reports that they'd heard accounts of the Maidstone's suspicious behavior, and the man orders that Wamujin is restrained and taken to the authorities, noting a wicked person like him should be bound and taken in. As he's pulled out, he curses at Banya, who openly supports the magistrate's decision, while Wamujin again calls him a disgusting bastard. He asks if they believe they'll get away with it, however Banya unbothered responds saying they'll be just fine. On the other hand, once Bakery realizes everyone is gone, she thinks, now I can finally suffer alone for as much as I want. She recalls how Banya used to soothe her with his hands before, but once she glances up, she finds him standing with a smirk on his face. He approaches her saying, "How pitiful you are. He traces his finger on her foot, and as he takes off her sock, he reveals he was only planning to watch, but really now, it's hard not to feel a bit sorry. Then he proceeds to teach her. Like this, if you go slowly it'll start to feel good. Then little by little harder. Then he asks her to just do it the way he showed her on her own, but she tightens her hand, reflecting on how because of the effect of the drug, she can't put strength into her hands. Her soft voice breaks, "Help me," but he teases her with a smirk on his face, asking if she can't do it on her own. "Please, help me. I can't do it by myself," she begs. As he slides off his cloth, he asks if he should with just his hands, but she just lays there almost tearful, asking him not to joke around. He drops his cloth, and responds stating she's making it hard to even tease her. "It's only been a month for me, but for you, it must have been 3 years since you've done this. To spend 3 years alone for your dead husband, although I was killed by your hands, I believe our marriage was a good one." Laying underneath him, she wonders why it feels like she's about to lose control, but Banya suddenly asks if she happened to feel it earlier. He mentions that bastard Wamujin must have gone mad, he was staring at her from behind the curtain. He continues stating Queen Mother of the West or not, he wanted to kill him right then and there. "As for me, my lady, until the last moment I draw my breath, I'll have your body all to myself." As she wraps her arm around his neck, their bodies connecting, she pleads softly, "Please, no more." Later, she steps out of the room wondering just how much he'd gone, cause it's still throbbing. But when she finds him, he appears perfectly fine even after doing all that. Even beats aren't like this. She asks if the annex is all cleaned up, and he says yes, revealing Chunseong took care of it well. He shares that he'd asked him specifically not to kill anyone when taking over the annex, and he handled it all without even drawing his twin swords. With satisfaction, he disclosed that the rescued slaves from the annex are being transferred to Chunseong. Then she retorts, "The procession is quite a sight, so this act of kindness by Wabanya will surely by words of the mouth, but that's a good deed made by using me." But he just asks if she'd seen the condition the slaves were in the previous day. They look like if they'd been a second later they'd be in serious danger. She recalls him mentioning his mother was from the annex of Chunyangru also, and thinks that must be how he knows the inner workings so well. Then he suggests they get going. She offers her hand to help the slaves they brought from Chunyangru side by side with her maid Cho-Cho. As she watches their improved condition, she smiles with satisfaction, grateful that their conditions have improved, though they still can't make proper eye contact. She's snapped by to reality by Cho-Cho, who informs her she'll brought the decorations, and she thanks her. She holds a bowl of soup in her hand, and as she cools it off she explains the soup was too bitter, so she added more licorice root to make it easier to drink. She feeds the old lady the suo, who thanks her in return, noting how Sister Do-hong was also that kind to her. Now, she mentions she's even receiving help again from her son and daughter-in-law. Then she confirms if she's indeed Banya's mother. She narrates how she was confined in the annex for 29 years, pointing out how even when Rienju was born she still remained kicked up in there, but he endured there until age 4, a place where even adults were struggling to live. Hearing the story, her gaze softens and her thoughts immediately go Banya. Unexpectedly, a slave comes up to her and mentions he has something important to tell her. She informs the old lady she'll be stepping out, asking her to call Cho-Cho if she needs anything. Once they're outside, the girl confesses. "Madam, actually, I was threatened. I thought Chunseong was a safe place, but it wasn't." Youngso stares at her confused as she asks what she means by that sentence now, but she just turns to her and apologizes. The next minute she throws a triangle-shaped knife at her, but she's able to dodge just in time. She throws multiple at her while she tries to block the weapons, and at the same time asks why she's doing that all of a sudden. But the servant pulls out a sword, looking at her with pure emptiness in her eyes. Youngso leans against the tree begging for her to spare her, however the girl swings the sword without hesitation. Youngso, realizing there might no other way, wonders what to do. "Do I have to use martial arts on a civilian?" Then, she spots him, watching with his brows raised. She dashes with full speed, screaming for help, while the servant continued chasing after her. Clearly with murderous intent, she swings the sword again. On the other hand, Chen Seong asks Banya if he's really just going to stand and watch, but he just asks, why bother helping someone who can run without losing breath? Look at that disgusting act. He continues mentioning how when she tried to kill him every needle was coated in piercing sword energy. But his direct subordinate calls him again, and when he responds he points out that his wife is running in his direction. The servant immediately goes stiff once she spots Banya in the distance. As a last attempt, she stops and splash dusts around them to hide her retreat. Once the smoke dies down, Banya snaps. He asks her to stop with her theatrics, noting how even if the smoke were poison, she wouldn't even flinch. He glances into the well and notices a hidden passage beneath the well. He mentions she said she was attacked and asks who gave the order for them to harm her. Then he notices not a trace of tears in her eyes. She responds that they'll find out once they capture the assassin and ask, "Then why didn't you save me earlier?" Our eyes met. Looking down at her, he asks if she was in danger, but she insists still his wife was under attack, but he just asks for a yes or no answer. He asks again if she was in danger and she doesn't meet his gaze as she responds, no. Then he backs up her response. He mentions if she was really in danger, she would have used martial arts, but then he admits he doesn't understand her at all. Why hide your skills? Is there a reason you can't be caught using them? He asks if she can at least tell him who taught her, commenting that he's never seen that kind of martial arts before, but she remains silent. She offers an apology silently in her mind, recalling how she made a promise to her master so she can never say. He just lets out a sigh, asking her to just forget it. Then he turns to his subordinate and orders him to seal the well and capture the intruders. In a new scene, when Mujin's sentence is passed, he's to be sentenced to 100 lashes and fined 10,000 silver coins, with Chunyangru and its annex permanently shut down. The sentence, which will be permanently executed at the judicial office the next day. Mujin throws curses at him while he sternly warns, for someone as skilled as him, erasing the entire place must be easy. However, note this, once you do, you will have turned every soldier in this nation against you. Banya and his wife Booths tell out of the room, and later she finds Chen Seong standing alone and asks if he knows where Rianju is. She explains how he dropped her off at the Titan Shalian gates, then left her to go somewhere, and he tells her he guesses he went to Chunyangru. Then he asks if the closure ruling for Chunyangru wasn't made that day and suggests he must have gone to annex. She informs him she'll head to the annex too, and he offers to escort her, but he passes once the thought comes to his mind, Rianju is likely stronger than he is. Young-so on the other hand thinks rejecting him feels strangely rude, but then he suddenly recalls he has some urgent matters to handle, but he suggests she at least brings a maid with her since she's taking the carriage. They arrive at the annex and Cho-Cho asks if she'll like her to go with her, but she refuses. Cho-Cho shares her worries, however she mentions Rianju is inside anyway. Once she steps out, Cho-Cho turns to the coachman and mentions she can't handle it, but once she glances back again she finds no trace of her mistress. Turns out she'd used her martial arts skills to escape. Facing the main residence's back entrance and the annex's entryway that are sealed, she knows she can't damage the official markings placed by the officials, so the only way possible now will be to enter through the light step technique, while Banya must have climbed over the annex's walls. She steps back, runs along the wall and finally lands gracefully. But she goes pale as soon as she finds Banya sit on the ruins of the place, blood pouring from his hand and a small scratch on his face. She calls his name softly, introducing herself as his wife Bakery Youngso. He paused, then he asked, "Did I ever tell you about my mother?" Her name was Help Do Hong. She was born in a small village just outside Nakan Fortress. One day while visiting a relative, she happened to pass in front of Chunyangru Pavilion, and as fate would have it, she caught the eye of one of the guests staying in the annex. Just like that, his mother was doomed to live out her days as a servant of the Chunyangru Pavilion annex, and it wasn't too long after that, she caught the eye of his real father, Wajik. Even after learning of his birth, he left them to rot for 4 years. Then one day out of nowhere, he summoned them to Chunseong. All of it was nothing but Wajik's whim. Ironically, it was that very whim that made it possible for him to leave the annex. And I was desperate to leave that place, because to me, it was nothing short of hell. He takes her hand and then asks, if she had been born there too, would she still have turned out so kind? In a new scene, she gently tucks her hair behind her ear, wondering if her appearance isn't too extravagant. They are headed to the execution grounds, and yet all that fuss, but it was nearly impossible for her to refuse. Above all, she glances at Banya, happy that he seems to be in good spirits today. She's never seen him look so lonely before, that now she questions if he's carried a pain like that his whole life. Banya suddenly leans over and with a whisper informs her that the execution is about to begin. Once inside, Waminju of course still maintains his hostile look, gritting his teeth in annoyance upon noticing the man who'd put him there. Banya, unbothered, just informs her that they've seen them, so they should smile, with a wide smile on his face. As she watches, she recalls how she'd heard Banya was bullied by Wamujin as a kid, so she concludes maybe that is some kind of justice for him. Later, she writes a letter to her brother. To my eldest brother, this is your youngest Youngso. She mentions the last time at Chunyangra Pavilion things almost got out of hand, but thanks to everyone's effort it was resolved smoothly. Even mentioning it seems it has eased her husband's anger. Today our third brother is visiting Chunseryang to assist with the roaming matters, but still and truly relieved things wrapped up well. Banya suddenly brings up the assassin who tried to attack her, asking if they're really going to let them go, and she says yes, since they were threatened by Jukwagon from the start. She also adds that since they failed their mission, they wouldn't be retiring there, nor will they attempt to deceive them any further. More importantly, she adds, giving a chance to someone who's already repented is one of the greatest acts of mercy. Then he tells her even if the assassin returns to kill her he wouldn't step in to help, but she just brings up how he didn't step in the last time. Cho-Cho, who's been standing outside, is finally given permission to come in, and when she does, she informs her that the young master Bakley has already arrived. She springs up in joy, and Cho-Cho remarks that he's the most handsome man she's ever seen in her life. On the other hand, once her brother arrives, a maid informs him that his sister and her husband are waiting to receive him in the reception room. Her brother finally arrived at the reception room. He introduced himself as Yong-Hyuk of the Bakley clan. Banya welcomes him to Chunseryang, calling him brother-in-law and at the same time inviting him inside, and her brother accepts the gesture of kindness, admitting Chunseryang is far more splendid and grand than he expected. Banya, with a smirk, asks if he believed they lived in a crumbling ruin, and he daringly admits to it, stating he wouldn't bother denying it. To ease the tension, she rushes to her brother, mentioning it's been 3 years, and he backs her up, yes, thanks to someone's stubbornness. He points out that if she hadn't insisted on mounting for 3 whole years they could have seen each other sooner, but she responds that she was just doing what she was taught. They laugh together. Then he suddenly mentions he couldn't get to include it in the letter because it was a last-minute decision. She's startled by his remaining sentence. But Jang Jiang came along on this visit too. Later, they all sit together, discussing over a meal. Banya speaks first. He asks if Master Seo is currently staying at his family home, and he says yes. Also, he explains that originally after the 3-year mourning period, Youngso was also supposed to return home, but then something unexpected happened. Meanwhile, Youngso remains quiet with the tense atmosphere, wondering how brother Jangyang ended up accompanying them. She ponders quietly, the fact that brother Jang Jiang was my betrothed. Banya responds in a detached tone, questioning, that's right, who could have known he'd return alive on the day the mourning ends? My lady, that's enough greeting, please show the guests to their room, Banya suggests. She turns around, evident as she confirms if he's speaking to her, and he says yes of course, reminding her she's the lady of Chunseryang. Once they take their leave, Banya turns to his direct subordinate and gives an order. From now on, watch Seo Jangyang. Don't take your eyes off him for even a moment, just observe whatever he does and report to me all at once at night. On the other hand, Youngso informs Hang Jiang that his room will need a bit more tidying, suggesting they go look at the pond sometime. To her brother, however, he just looks at her and asks why the room wouldn't be ready. She assured him it wouldn't take too long, suggesting they can return to the room after a short walk, but his voice brought her movements to a sudden pause. But Youngso, are you going to keep acting like this? He continues, stating he knows he came suddenly, but not saying a single word to him seems harsh. Immediately he asks if it's because of her husband, if by chance he's pressuring her, and for the first time she responds. This time she tells him that's enough, adding she doesn't want to argue in the presence of young Master SEO. But her brother only presses further. You can't even call Jang Jiang by his name. But she doesn't let that move her. She says of course not, pointing out that she's a married woman who was taught not to carelessly speak the name of other men who aren't her family or her husband. She suggests he keeps talking like that if he's trying to make things difficult for her. Her brother apologizes, explaining that he didn't mean to make things difficult for her, but still, he can't just watch the two of them act so awkwardly around each other. He urges them to at least exchange greetings. He informs them he'll go to his room first so they can talk comfortably. He takes his leave and she glances back at Jang Jiang, recalling her brother's last words. She also recalls her past conversation with Banya and wonders how she can treat him like before after hearing that. She takes a glance at him as she finally accepts it. She can't dream of a future with him anymore, but what's with that look in his eyes? It's too obvious. I shouldn't provoke Banya's murderous intent. But Hang Jiang suddenly speaks, addressing her as sister. He apologizes for coming without any notice, sharing that her brother originally wanted to contact her first but he insisted. Because he wanted to see for himself how the angel Rienju treats her. With a light smile she discloses she understands what he's worried about, pleading with him not to worry so much. My husband likes me. He even made a vow at the Queen Mother of the West Shrine. For my sake, he said he'd live the rest of his life doing good deeds. He isn't convinced and instead asks if she really believes those words. She says yes, but he voices his disagreement. He explains that though Rienju might not know him, but he's met him before. Then, he was standing proudly in a scene of carnage, covered in blood. By his hand 250 disciples of the righteous faction, 12 government soldiers and 55 civilian men died, but he left that scene with a refreshed look on his face. He continues, but this time he tells her such a person doesn't change. He asks how can someone who confirms their self-worth through indiscriminate killing possibly reform? For the sake of those he killed, Jang Jiang says he shouldn't change, so that he'll fall to the deepest part of hell when he dies. You said earlier, Sister Youngso, that the angel Rienju cherishes you. Then how do you feel about him? Do you like him too? In a new scene, Banya gazing down emotionlessly confirms something from his subordinate. That woman really said that? His assistant undoubtedly repeats his answer, yes. Raising his finger to his lips, Bangs questions if she actually had the nerve to say that right in front of her wistful ex-fiancé, no less. His subordinate finally raises his head, silently pondering, I have already seen it all, so just put your hand down and smile. On the other hand, Youngso and her brother discuss what to do with the people rescued from Chunyangru who wish to stay far away from Jiuquagong. As she shares her suggestions, her brother silently observes her, and when she notices, she turns and asks him why. He mentions she looks pale, asking to check her pulse, but again she sighs, remarking that she already told him she's fine. He tells her that is why he wishes to confirm it, but she strongly refuses. Then a thought crosses his mind. Why is she resisting so much? Could it be that Vanya left a mark she's hiding? Even our parents never scolded her growing up. He immediately calls her name, and when she asks why he keeps checking her pulse, insisting that she's fine, he simply replies, asking if her husband is hurting her. She tells him he's taking it too far now, adding he's just overly worried about her, rather he just asks how he wouldn't be. He mentions with someone so delicate staying in a place like that, bringing up how her husband, the number one in the demonic sect, suddenly died there and the culprit hasn't even been caught. Although inconveniently he came back to life. She realizes that trying to stop him would be a lost cause, so she finally gives in, but her sudden change in attitude only fuels her brother's suspicion, leaving him wondering why the sudden change in attitude. She rolls up her sleeve, stating if that is what it'll take to reassure him, then his generous little sister will oblige. So he checks her pulse, but it's almost too steady, something about it feels off, and he finds it suspicious. At that moment, Jane Young arrives and he apologizes for being late. HR turns his head once he finds her brother checking her pulse and apologizes for the sudden intrusion. Then he asks if she's not feeling well, but her brother reports that she's fine, mentioning her pulse is overly stable even. He suggests they get back to the discussion now that Jang Young has arrived, and they agree. Watching two of them together, her brother can only think of how unfortunate their situation is. They could have made a good couple. Later, she sits on her bed worn out. They did plan the relocation of 100 people, and it's mostly wrapped up, although she can't stop noticing the look in brother Jang Young's eyes despite his attempt to hide it. It still appears so obvious to her that pretending not to see that kind of gaze was more tiring than she expected. She drops to the bed hoping a deep sleep will clear her mind a bit. In the dream she had that night, it had been 3 years since she and brother Jang Young got married. However, right after their wedding he took an official post and left far away. And today, I was meeting him for the first time in 3 years. She rushes to him, happily calling him brother, while he teases her, asking if she's still calling him brother. She mentions it's just a habit and says from then on, she'll call him properly, my husband. He tells her he didn't catch that, but his trick is obvious and she doesn't call for it. Holding her head up, he tells her titles can change over time and what he's in a rush to do isn't that. It's this, he says as he leans in forward and then kisses her. She wraps her arm around him, totally absorbed in the moment. They move towards the bed and there she begs him, already flustered, to wait just a moment, but instead, he settles on top of her with a smile, while she looks at him absolutely conquered. But at that moment, they are suddenly interrupted. Holding her, he yells, demanding to know who's there, and the man responds by calling his name. "Seo Jang Young, I've been waiting for you to come home." He asks Banya if he realizes what he's done, noting attacking there is no different from declaring a war, but like a twisted psychopath, Banya remarks that it sounds fun, disclosing he's been wondering how many people he could kill. On the other hand, Youngso glances around searching for her embroidery frame and needles, but Banya quickly notices and asks her what she is looking for so eagerly. "Just so you know, no one can come here, I made sure of that." Jang Young curses him between his teeth as he goes for him, but Youngso's voice quickly calls him back, warning him to watch his back. She thinks she can't just sit still, but Babies blocks her attacks. He glances at his direct subordinate, who immediately gets the signal and lunges at Jang Young. Youngso attacks him from ahead, but he notices just in time and goes for her, catching the attention of Jang Young, who's in the middle of a fight with Chun Sil-seong, and the subordinate, taking the opportunity, slices him down. "You're the famous Hadding's top beauty, Bakery Youngso, aren't you? Truly worthy of bearing my heir." Rubbing her belly softly, he asks, "How about it? Right here, if you just receive my seed, I'll spare everyone. Just once, isn't General Seo's life worth at least that?" In defeat, she asks if he'll spare the others, and he assured her he would, of course excluding those who are already dead. Jang Young, bleeding on the floor, urges her not to listen to him, but Banya with a whisper mentions it seems she's made up her mind. He asks her what'll be, and then she drops her request. "Please, at least escort my husband out of this room." Banya leaves that to his subordinate, while Jang Young with a shout asks if he doesn't fear divine judgment, but Banya pays him no heed. Then, if there's good news in a couple of months, do send word to Chunseon. I won't treat the mother of my child poorly either. He slips off his robe and then pulls her closer to him. A smirk forms on his face while she exclaims for him to stop. "I guess General Seo didn't do this for you, you're this flustered. I thought I was just sleeping with Seo Jang Young's wife today, but maybe I'm actually stealing away a bride who's never had her wedding night." Her eyes water as she thinks she really can't take it anymore. "I can't endure this. Should I continue this manhwa?" Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel for more amazing recaps.